Yeah, sorry. Okay, so yes, now it's been audible. Okay, so this is what the table of content is. Like first the introduction, second the stats, third the top 5 vulnerability, fourth with the conclusion. So I guess it's good to start. So before getting into an attack site, so we need to know how the intrusion has been happening. So if we have a clear idea about the intrusion, so it is easy for us to understand how the attack is happening. So based on the attack, it can be classified into four types. The first is a web-based intrusion, second is a host-based intrusion, third is a network-based intrusion, and finally with the cloud-based intrusion. So these are all the four overview category about attack sites, attack path. So whether the attacker can intrude based on the web application, or attacker can bypass some host and get compromise one of the host machine, or attacker can use some network based vulnerability to get intrude into an internal network. Or now due to like the cloud has been emerging, so it opened a new gateway on cloud based intrusion too. So generally these four has been categorized based on the behavior, how an intrusion can be happens. So why I'm just mentioning is like it is important to know how the intrusion is happening. So it is easy for us to understand how how the attackers are exploiting this vulnerabilities and CVEs in the recent year. So this is the first and foremost introduction. We need to have a clear understanding about the intrusion type. So it is helpful in understanding the attacks and CVEs. So let's kickstart into some stats in the year of 2022. So cyber attacks are keep on increasing day to day in the year of 2022. It is not even decreasing. Even we have some multiple high-end security controls. Still, it's been increasing day by day. We are experiencing 66% of cyber attacks in past 12 months. So the frequency of the attacks has keep on increasing in past 12 months. And some top major the top rated attacks are still it's been phishing and social engineering stands up to 57% of attacks, and compromise on stolen device stands for 33%, and credential theft stands for 30%. So in every 11 seconds the world is experiencing in every 11 seconds the world is experiencing ransomware attacks in every countries. So even like in 2020 it's been like 45 seconds, but in 2022 it's been decreases to every 11 second. So in each every 11 second organization around the world has been targeted with the ransomware. So this is the very uh, brief stat about 2022. And what are all the attacks has been targeted? So 65% of web-based attacks has been happening. So attackers are keep on targeting the web for their initial exploitation, and 15% of network-based attacks has been happening like due to some network-based vulnerability. 15% of network-based attacks has been uh, exploited, and 10% of host-based attacks like malwares, Trojan virus has been exploited by the host-based attack, and 82% of data breach has been experienced in the year of 2022. Like even like top companies like Uber, WhatsApp, Google has been experienced a major data breach in the year of 2022. So these are all. This is the this count has been dramatically increased compared to the previous year due to the list of vulnerability has been discovered in the year of 2022. So what stats tell is like more than 28,000 of CVEs has been reported in the year of 2022. In 2020 we have experienced 30,000 CVEs, but in 2022 we are experiencing 28,000. But these 28,000 are being reported as a high vulnerable CVEs. So the impact of the CVE has been very high. So that's what the point is. Although we are having like 2000 downwards, but still it's been counted as a very high impactable stuff. Let's move further. So these are all the top 5 vulnerabilities which has been uh, considered as a top vulnerabilities of the year. Like the first, which is gone for the Log4j, and second is for Follina, third is for String4j, and fourth stands for Google 0 days, Google Chrome 0 days, and fifth it's a big FI big IP. Okay, so these are all the 5 top rated vulnerabilities. So these are all been categorized based on their impact and their frequency of attack. So these 5 attacks has been prioritized based on that frequency of the attacks and impact of this attack. Okay, so as we already know, Log4j, which has been reported at the end of 2021, although it's created a huge impact even at 2022. So this is a brief, like this is a small overview how how we have rated the top 5 vulnerability of the year. Mm, let's discuss about Log4j. So this specific term has been famous in every security researcher. We know that Log4j is very highly impactable, highly impactable vulnerability discovered on the year. So Log4j is a mm, it's primarily used for logging and monitoring the software. In it has a ability to it has a ability to logs the it has a ability to communicate with the other services on a system. Like um, it is a logging application which used to collect error message or some troubleshooting issues. Uh, so what happened is the attackers has found some vulnerability on this specific package, and it's been constantly exploited across the world. So this is what happens. And the sad reality is this specific Log4j has been used worldwide across many software application. Even it has been used on many online services too. So what is the attack type is the attack type is categorized as remote code execution. The CVSS score is 10. It is highly impactable. So yeah, before explaining about JNDI, so what make the Log4j is high impactable? So the first and foremost reason is the um, availability. Okay, so Log4j package has been used on many web application too. So it make the attackers can publicly access that specific resource to exploit the vulnerability. For example, let us take a company A which have hosted a web application which has the web application has need to be monitored, so they have used the log4j package in that specific web application. So this specific web application can be accessed by anyone, so the vulnerability disclosed in that stuff can be exploited by anyone. If they are vulnerable to that specific log4j log4j packet, it can be exploited by anyone across the world. So it is publicly accessible. That's the first and foremost make this vulnerability top rated, and the impact of this vulnerability. So what happen is log4j can directly communicate with the internal services. Okay, so this JNDI, like Java naming and directory interface, has been used between that logging package. So attacker crafted some malicious payload to communicate with the LDAP to fetch or to deploy some malicious payload in that internal system. This is what the attack overview is. So before getting to attack map, so what is JNDI? Java naming and directory interface. It's a Java API that allow application to communicate with other applications such as LDAP, DNS, NIS, etc. So it acts as an intermediate uh, to handle request and response between the users and the server. So the if the user is sending some suspicious, it going to access the JNDI, and it going to access the LDAP, and it's going to fetch the result. So this is what happened, and even this specific resource has been publicly accessible. That's the second point is in this specific vulnerability. Mm, Third, working like this specific vulnerability has some 4-step exploit method. So it is very simple. So first we need the initial attackers target a publicly available server with a vulnerable version of log4j. library. Okay, so this is what the first point is. The attackers need to scan or need to find what is that vulnerable, what is the publicly available server with the vulnerability version of log4j. So if I'm just discovered one website with that specific vulnerable log4j library, so I can craft some malicious request to a victim server. So the crafted malicious consist of some LDAP queries. Okay, so the with the combination of JNDA. So as I mentioned, JNDA is act as an intermediate between that LDAP services and that request from that sender. So it act as an intermediate between that sender and the LDAP server. What is the main problem is it is executed without verifying it. So that's the second exploited method here. So the victim server will just connect to attacker LDAP server without verifying it. So there is no proper verification in the background. That is the third point. Then the attacker will send a LDAP response to a victim server with the malicious payload. Since the log4j library is vulnerable to receive the payload and execute without verification, the attacker can make use of the vulnerability to compromise the victim server. So this is what the entire attack path is. The first one is need to find some publicly accessible server with the vulnerable log4j library. Second, we need to craft some JNDI request which need to send to that specific server. And we in the crafted it should have some LDAP queries, so we can actually communicate to the Active Directory services, and we can deploy some payloads, or we can even take a reversal in that specific scenario. So this is what that entire working of log4j. So it will give you a clear overview how the attack map work for the log4j. So first and foremost is attackers sweep the internet for exposed log4j vulnerability server. So as I mentioned, first we need to find some web application with the specific vulnerability of log4j. Second, we need to craft a malicious HTTP request to our exposed server. So it is so we find some web application which is using a log4j packet. So I'm just going to craft some get request to the specific targeted web server with the JNDI and LDAP request. So this is what that payload process is. So this is how the payload look like. So we are just going to custom create the request, and we are just going to send it to a vulnerable web server. So the victim server log the request using log4j. So which the JNDA act as an intermediate to send the response to a LDAP server with the malicious class. Okay, the Java malicious class is mentioned in that log4j, and the victim server can execute malicious payload, or we can take. So this is what the exploitation part is. So we can do some we can get some reverse shell. We can download some backdoor in that specific server. We can do a lot more. So this is how the entire attack map work. First, starting with that exposed log4j uh, server, and we need to craft a malicious JNDI request, and we need, using the help of LDAP, we can compromise the specific web server. There are multiple compromisation technique like remote shell, ransomware. We can do a lot more if we get access to that specific web server. Yeah, so this is how the log4j work. So it has been mitigated, I guess, before 7 or 6 months. Although like attackers are still we are seeing some web application which is hosted with that specific vulnerable package, but mostly the Apache has released some patch in this specific package like log4j repository. So this is how the log4j work. So now the second top rated vulnerability is Follina. So Follina is a log4j is a web based intrusion. So as we know, it use some publicly hosted website for compromising. But Follina is a host based intrusion. So comparatively, we know that web based intrusion is more host based intrusion are very difficult than a web based intrusion. Okay, because if in case of host based intrusion, we have multiple security control like antivirus, anti malware, there are a lot more, and we can't even access that internal system. So host-based intrusion are comparatively high, comparatively difficult in case of web-based application, because web-based are being exposed in internet, so anyone from anywhere can access that. But host-based intrusion are comparatively hard to an web-based. Okay, so this Follina has been discovered recently by one of the security researcher. What is the major flaw in Follina is it is Follina targeted Office 365 products. Okay, so it can be a Word document, it can be a Excel sheet. So it is a zero day discovered in Office product. Okay, the specific vulnerability uses Microsoft MSDT to execute shell command on the target system. Okay, so by default we know like the macros in Office product is this used by many attackers to create backdoor, schedule process and lot more stuff. So as many companies has implement restricted to use the macros in their internal system. So this specific attacks created a new gateway, like even if the macros is disabled, the attacker can use that MSDT process to execute a shell code in the targeted system. So this MSDT act as an intermediate between the host machine and the attacker machine for communication. So MSDT is generally used for diagnostic purposes. For example, if I'm just experiencing some issues in Office product, so I can actually report the specific issue to that Microsoft team via this MSDT tool. Okay, so this specific tool is public. Specific tool can access the internet, so that's what the major flaw is. So the attacker has, so it created a gateway, so the attacker can intrude via this MSDT to a host machine. So that's why it is the attack type for this specific Fulna is command execution. So I can execute the whatever command, so I created, so I can create a specific payload and I can execute in the target host machine, and the CVE score is 10. The frequency is pretty low in Follina, but the impact is still considered as a high. So that's why that Follina has been top rated. And the working of Follina. So the crafted Word document get redirected to a malicious HTML file which contain a malicious script which invoke MSDT to execute the command shell. Okay. So as I previously mentioned, it does not require any macros function. It does not require any macros enabled for this specific attack. Although if the macros is disabled, Follina can be executed via this MSDT. So what exactly I just required is, so I just need to create some payloads in a HTML format. So let us take, like, this is what the sample HTML is. So this is, so I just hosted this specific payload in some C2 server. So what I can do is, using this MSDT, I can call this specific HTML script and I can execute the command. So in this specific payload, so the attacker is invoking the calc.exe. So what happened is the MSDT call this specific HTML and execute this specific HTML to open the calc.exe. So this is what happens in the background. Mm, Even if the macro is disabled, that's the main advantage in this specific attack. And later for Follina, they just instructed every organization to disable that MSDT function. So MSDT will be automatically seen on executed on the background. So after the specific attack, so every organization has been instructed to disable that MSDT function. So this is what the Follina. This is why the Follina stands the second. Although the frequency is less, the impact of this specific Follina is high. So now we just moving for the third top vulnerability of the year. So it's Spring 4J. Okay. So after the discovery of Log 4J, within 3 or 4 weeks, the Spring 4J has been discovered. It is much similar to a Log4j, but this time, like previously, Log4j targeted the Log4j package, but this time it's targeted the Spring4j framework. Okay, Spring, like as we already know, Spring is an application development framework for Java. So if you are a developer, you might be more familiar with this specific framework. So there are lots and lots. lots of developer using that Spring framework for writing performance and reusable code. So many has been developing some multiple code using this specific framework. The core feature of Spring framework is that it can be used developing an any Java application, even it can be a host-based application, web-based application. It can be created using the Spring 4J. What exactly the vulnerability done is remote code execution. So the attacker can remotely send a code which need to be executed on the host machine. So the CVE score stands for 9.8 to 10. Because the Spring 4J is not publicly exposed, that's why the score differed from 9.8 to 10. Let's see the working of this specific attack. As I said, like after the discovery of log4j, within 2 or 3 weeks the spring4j has been spring4 shell vulnerability has been discovered. So it actually exists on the request mapping interface. So the attacker can exploit the spring4j using some publicly crafted malicious request to a module.get class loader. So this specific class has been vulnerable for this specific attack. This class allow an attacker to load an arbitrary malicious class the server must pass. Okay. Mm, this is what like this is not well handled, and using this specific class the attacker can execute some malicious code into a target host machine. So it is a version based vulnerability. After this specific vulnerability, the officially spring has been spring framework has released an updated one. So this version is vulnerable for not filtering the attack path. So this is what the major vulnerability in this uh, spring spring shell. So that's why this is also like why it's been rated as a top 3 is because it is hosted on many web applications. That's what the major vulnerability is. It can be exploited publicly. That is one of the reason to stand at the third place. It is a web-based intrusion, not a host-based intrusion. I also mentioned in the point. Yeah, let's move forward. The fourth is a Chrome 0 day. So this specifically Chrome 0 day stands for host-based intrusion. This is a host-based intrusion. So as we already know, we are experience multiple Chrome patches in the year of 2022. So Chrome has constantly releasing some security like emergency security update for desktop version, even for mobile version. There are more than 8 0-day vulnerability has been exploited in this specific year. The highest severity flaw is tracked as CVE 20204135. What is the exact vulnerabilities? It's totally based on heap and buffer overflow in GPU. Okay, so this is what the attack in this specific 0 day. Uh, the probability of the attack is too rare because it is a host-based vulnerability, so it is been very rare to exploit because it is not publicly exposed, but still it's standing as a fourth place due to the impact of this specific 0 day, and there are multiple exploit has been discovered in this year. So you can see like I just mentioned the 8 CVEs which has been constantly exploited in February, March, April, June, yeah, April, July, August, September, October. So in every constant month, the attackers has discovered multiple CVEs on this specific Chrome version on the desktop. So this frequency has ranked this specific 0 day in that fourth place. Mm. Now we are just going to see about the final one. FI Big IP. Okay, so FI Big IP is a application. It's a security application which used for protecting an application at layer 3 and layer 7 against mm it it is a firewall structured application. It is used for it is used for monitoring and detecting some web attacks at the layer 3 and layer 4, mostly used for preventing DOS attack. Okay, so recently they just discovered a vulnerability recently they just discovered a RCE in Big IP. This flaw affect the big IP control REST authentication component. So this specific I control REST authentication has been targeted. If an attacker successfully exploit that specific vulnerability, so he or she can get a remote code execution. So the attacker can execute some commands in the targeted system, which also allow an attacker to bypass authentication and execute commands in the vulnerable device. So this is what the specific attack stands for. So even nowadays the security control tool are also being targeted, because as we already know the big IP is some security controls for protecting network based attack, but it's also been targeted by many attackers. So that's the reason this specific attacks used for initial access purpose, because it is also public. I guess it is not publicly exposed, but if it is exposed in publicly, it may create a path for an initial access attack. So that's why the big IP stands in the fifth. So this why stands. Okay. So as per today, we just discuss about the top five vulnerability in the year of 2022. So this specific prioritization has been done based on the severity and impact and frequency of this attack. So that's make this spy vulnerability to place in this position. So I hope this session might be useful. So yeah, thanks for watching. So there are, I just took some pretty good reference from this specific site. So I like to give a credit. Let's